Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a couple of cards for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. Got to admit, the colors threw me for a loop, but that's also why I like the Color Throwdown Challenge, because it gets me thinking, and yeah, I gotta think outside my, crafty toolkit, crafty box, etc. So I pulled out some Distress HEAVYSTOCK and some Oxide sprays and one spray stain. I'm using Vintage Photo, Antique Linen, and Barn Door Oxide sprays, as well as a bit of Vintage Photo Distress spray stain, and just creating a couple of backgrounds. So just spraying them, splattering them, adding a bit of water, just letting them kind of do their thing. And this was actually my second attempt. The first attempt, I tried using all the colors, including prize ribbon, which wasn't awful. It just, nothing, it just wasn't, I just wasn't feeling it, which happens. I always tell everyone, it's like, just sit and play, create backgrounds, or just experiment, see what happens. And especially when it comes to things like this, like backgrounds, whether you're doing sprays or ink smushing or just messing around like with a jelly plate. People keep asking me if if I'm going to start showing that. I have jelly plates. I haven't got into using it yet. It's still sitting in the packaging. In fact, both of them are. I have more than one. Anyway, create backgrounds, whether you have an intended purpose for them or not. And the best thing is, just like anything else, when I say, it's like sometimes if you're not feeling it, like walk away, come back with fresh eyes. A lot of times that'll change. But with things like this, it's like, if you're not the happiest with it, die cut it. Pull out some wafer dies, die cut it. That might totally change. Cut it down, die cut it, see what you think. Because more often than not, it'll change. Like even now, like these two backgrounds that I did, I was like, but then I die cut them, and I used Simon's Etched oak leaves wafer dies. Chef's kiss. Loved it. It worked. The detail in the wafer dies, because it like cuts all this like etching detail and embosses a bit of detail and all that fun stuff. And that totally changed them. So they're no longer backgrounds. They're little die cut leaves with all these little speckly, fleckly bits to them. And it was great. So then, to get that blue in there, I'm using Lawn Fawn's Blue Jay cardstock. Such a pretty color. And I ink blended Prize Ribbon Distress ink just around the perimeter. This will dry back quite a bit, but it's there. That's all that matters. And then I'm going to add more splatter, of course. Splatter fixes everything. So I used the Vintage Photo and the Antique Linen Distress Oxide spray again. Made sure to shake them up really well. And then I just unscrewed the whole thing and used the nozzle to tap and add splatter to both of these pieces of cardstock, making a big old mess. I should have put these into the splat box, but sometimes I like using the splat box. Other times I just, there is no explanation. Anyway, I cleaned up the mess. And then I pulled out the Thanks wafer die, and I die cut this from some bright red cardstock, of course, multiple times. And I'm going to stack these layers together with craft tacky glue, so I get a nice bit of dimension. So I've got two of them. Stack the 3 layers together. The outlines I had die cut from that same Distress HEAVYSTOCK, the cream colored HEAVYSTOCK, and I didn't want it to be like, I don't want to call it harsh, but I didn't want it to be clean, because I am splattering and ink blending and doing all the things. So it's like, this needs it too. So why not? So I'm going to use some Vintage Photo Distress ink with just my little blending foam that I keep with my little Distress ink cubes. I've shown this in videos like years and years and years ago, but I keep, dedicated blending foams for these colors because they fit in the bottom of the Distress cubes. So I don't have to worry about storage because they're just right there. So that's what I used to ink around the edges of these outlines. So it just softens them a little bit and just gives it that little bit of brown color, which just gives it that little extra something. I did the same thing with the Thanks wafer dies, except I used Barn Door Distress ink, and I used a blending brush because the brush enables me to get in there. It's not It's not obvious, really, in the end. Honestly, I'm not even 100% sure if it made a difference. I'm just looking at the finished card as I'm doing this voiceover, and it's had, a good long time to dry. Sometimes it just depends. It's the same concept as when I talk about using like Copic markers on pattern paper or Copic markers on basically anything other than white cardstock, and how it'll look much darker than you think because the ink is wet. It's the same thing with this. When you are ink blending onto cardstock that already has color, it helps to, like, if you want to test it first. With this, it isn't the end of the world. But if you're not sure, test a scrap, blend the color onto it, whether you're using inks or Copics or whatever it is you're using, and then let it dry and see, like, is there a difference, or if you like the color or whatever, So, anywho, on my little die cut leaves, I adhered to this background. If you really wanted to zhuzh it up, you could adhere them with like foam adhesive, like foam squares, etc., and they'd be popped up with dimension. That would look amazing. I did think about it, but I decided I wasn't going to bother. It was more work. And just adhering them flat, I was like, no, this works, but it would look really nice to pop them up with dimension. But again, I was like, no, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to just adhere them, and then I'm going to add more splatter. Because like I said, splatter fixes everything. So I adhered all the leaves to these backgrounds, and then I flipped them over and trimmed off the excess. Then I put them back in my splat box, and I'm going to add gold splatter. Because splatter fixes everything, but gold splatter really fixes everything. So I'm going to use my Starry Colors, my Gansai Tombi Starry Colors palette, and my fan brush, and the gold, of course, and heavily splatter this because I want the leaves and the background to get just a nice healthy dose of gold splatter, and I love it. Also, because when you look closely, I think maybe you can see in the photos, I love on the background how the vintage photo and antique linen splatter seems to be more like almost in the foreground, and the gold splatter is more like up front. It's just an interesting way it all came together. So anyway, for my little companion sentiments, I'm using the Grateful and Thankful sentiment strips, and I didn't want those to be harsh white, so I took the antique linen distress ink and blended that with its little blending foam, and I'm using just a bit of Post-it tape on my fingers just to prevent me getting fingerprints, because these are water reactive inks, and blending little things like that, more often than not, fingerprints will show up, so just that's the reasoning for that. And then once that's done, I can adhere my sentiments to my card fronts. So I've got the thanks. I had adhered it to its outline. I'm going to adhere that to the background. I use my little T-square ruler to make sure it was straight. And then I can adhere the little sentiment strip. So I'll say thanks for everything you do. Once I've got that adhered into place, on the inside of my cards are going to be top folding A2 cards made from Simon Smooth White cardstock. And I have some extra leaves here. They weren't extras, but I die cut, like I had said earlier, that I had done, like, messed around making a couple backgrounds and I wasn't happy with them. I die cut them, waste not, want not. But yeah, I wasn't really pleased with how they turned out. But once I die cut them with the leaves, I was like, these work, and I can use them on the inside of my cards. It just gives them a little extra something. So I adhered them to the insides of the cards, and then I adhered another sentiment strip that I had ink blended. And then my card fronts, I'm going to adhere with Simon's Big Mama foam tape. So I got that little bit of dimension. You could always leave it here, but of course I'm going to add a little bit of bling, because of course I have bling that's like goes perfectly with these colors. So this time it's Studio Cadia Blue Azurite. I hope I pronounced that properly. I didn't Google it before I did the voiceover. Beautiful. They're kind of subtle. You could definitely go brighter, like do like a bright red or an orange, even a brown. Cream would look like cream pearls would look beautiful too. But these blue ones I had to use. And again, in real life, and you'll see them in the photos better. In the video, they just kind of seem to fade into everything, but they're pretty, not distracting. They're just good. So, as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. In my blog post, I'll link to the Color Throwdown Challenge. You guys can check it out if you're interested. It's just something we do for fun every week. And I will also, of course, link to all the supplies I used. So you can check that out in the description box below the video if you are interested. And again, even though the Stamptember collabs are over, etc., I still have a ton of videos coming, so just stay tuned. As always, thank you guys so much for commenting and thumbs upping, taking the time to watch my videos. Subscribe if you haven't. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!